Good morning, friends. It's your boy, Max Mogren, reporting live for you from beautiful Alpine, Wyoming. This is Wake Up Wyoming, a special edition. I know usually we pick apart the local paper, the Jackson Hole News and Guide, take the local news, take the national news, take the fluff, the advertising, and kind of expose the spin for what it is, exposing misinformation in the media. But today, well, we're going to do about the same thing today, but we're going to take it even more local, go in depth on a couple local issues. First off, I've been asked by one of my followers to address the Forest Stearns horse abuse video. For those of you that don't know, here in Jackson Hole on the 10th, a couple days ago, this really disturbing video came out that shows a horse outfitter based in Wilson, Wyoming, named Forest Stearns, Forest Stearns, doing what looks like abusing a horse. He's got this horse tied up on the ground by its head to one fence and both of its legs to the other fence. Supposedly, he was trying to shoe this horse and it kicked somebody, so he was punishing it. But according to neighbors and all the info online, it sounds like this horse was tied up on its side, struggling for 5 or 6 hours until it finally died from a heart attack. His neighbor came over, made a short video kind of calling him out on it, and now it's a big deal. There's a Facebook page called Justice for the Horses of Stearns Outfitters. Check that out. A lot of people, I think 500 or 600 people have already joined that. Over 50,000 views of this video of the horse. And it certainly looks like abuse to me in the era of modern horse training techniques. So if you're local or you're involved in, animal protection issues, animal cruelty issues, check that one out. Apparently, Mr. Stearns, I've had reports from other people that Stearns was once, he's got a few like Dewey convictions and domestic issue convictions. And this isn't the first time he's been accused of cruelty to animals. But also I've had reports from a friend that Mr. Stearns, I haven't been able to confirm this, but apparently he was in a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court when he was driving down Teton Pass and he lassoed a man riding a bicycle, like horse cowboy shit, lassoed this African-American man riding a bicycle down Teton Pass. I don't know too much about that situation, but it's certainly worth looking into. And if it's true, I think it says a lot about this guy's character. So if you want to get involved with the Stearns issue, the animal cruelty issue, check out the new Facebook group, Justice for the Horses of Stearns Outfitters. Thank you all for tuning in. Good morning to you, Alan. Good morning, Lindsay. Good morning, Enid. Thank you. We got 57 viewers. I'm stoked. Again, this special edition here today, we are looking at a local issue in depth. Now, my show here at Wake Up News, we always look for the truth. We read between the lines of the mainstream media. And an article came out on Wednesday that affects a pretty big local issue, and it was so biased that I had to write a big response to it. It's on my website, thesheepeater.tukadika.com. Took me about 20 hours to research and write this thing, but it's an issue that I feel pretty passionately about, and I've been on the fence about it for a while. It's really not the biggest issue in the world, but it does address a lot of topics, like environmental topics, the way government really works, the way the media works, and so on and so forth. It's the Jackson Hole River Parks project. Now, for those that don't know, in 2012, they got the ball rolling on this. They've had meetings with the county since 2013. And on Tuesday, the 15th, so just coming up early next week, there is going to be a vote at the county commissioners meeting, 9 a.m. at the Teton County Administration Building, where they're going to decide whether to proceed with this thing further. Okay, they're not granting final approval. As it turns out, talking with some of the organizers of the Jackson Hole River Parks project, once they got the county on board to give this initial, agreement to sign off on it and look into it, then the parks project has to go to the U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, WYDOT, FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, and several other agencies. So this project is not all the way pushed through yet, right? What is it? Well, it's a proposal to build a privately funded public park near the South Park Bridge, just upstream of the South Park Bridge here in Jackson Hole. That will include, I think it's a 36 acre site, so parking lot, landscaping, trails, benches, that sort of thing, and then a man-made whitewater wave out in the Snake River. Obviously controversial. Obviously it's a big environmental concern to be building anything in the river, right? How will this impact migrating fish species? Will this affect boaters? Big issues there, like real questions that need to be asked. So there needs to be a legitimate dialogue on this thing at the, the local, county, statewide, and maybe even national level. There are lots of whitewater parks in the U.S. already, something like 100 at least. I know there are 21 in Colorado. There's one in Evanston, Wyoming. There's one in Boise, Idaho. There's one in Missoula, Montana. They're all over the place. And it's, I think there needs to be more study on the impacts these have on fish and such. But to get the dialogue started, to get that research funded, to get the community engaged, we need honest, objective journalism. And this article on the front page of the Jackson Hole Daily, wedged between the story about healthcare costs for affordable care applicants rising by 48% this year. That's pretty huge. We kind of saw that one coming. And then there's an article on the eclipse. Here in the middle, the Snake River Play Park faces hurdles. And this is a great example of biased journalism masquerading, or biased opinion masquerading as front page news. I'm going to read you a few paragraphs. Hackles are rising over a proposed in-stream whitewater park at South Park that experts say could ecologically sever the Snake River, blocking passage for native fish species like migratory bluehead suckers. Teton County commissioners will decide Tuesday if the nonprofit group Jackson Hole River Parks Project can proceed with an application for the project in question, which would add a manufactured wave, boulders secured to the riverbed, and a permanently armored island in the Snake River just downstream of the South Park Bridge. Okay, so right there, right off the bat, the first two paragraphs, they cite experts saying it's going to sever the ecological integrity of the river, and obviously saying it's building a permanently armored island. That makes it sound like a pretty big deal. Permanently armored. That sounds like some military grade installations there, right? Also notable in the second paragraph, they say the park would be downstream of the bridge, but actually the design is for upstream of the bridge. So a huge difference there. Just downstream of the South Park Bridge, there are 2 boat ramps. And obviously, if the Jackson Hole News and Guide wanted to upset the river running, the boating community, a great way to do that would be to falsely inform their readers that this river park is going to be built right next to or on top of the boat ramps, which is not true. It's built on the other side of the bridge. Leading up to the decision-making point, concern about the plan has filtered in from wildlife managers, water resource specialists, advocacy groups, and the river running community. Okay, so there it sounds like a lot of people are really upset about this thing, right? We got wildlife managers, water resource specialists, advocacy groups, and the river running community. It's like putting a climbing wall or an elevator on the Grand Teton, said Charlie Sands, longtime owner of Sands Whitewater. I told the county, if you're going to allow that, the Whitewater Park, I want a Ferris wheel up there. Sands called the river park ridiculous, and he worried it would be a burden for scenic floaters and fishing boats to pass through. The county, he said, ought not to allow private businesses to screw around with the public good, like the snake. Then it goes on and on. They get into some science. And analyzing this article, it's about 30 paragraphs long. 22 of those paragraphs could be characterized as blatantly opposed to the river park. Only 3 paragraphs express obvious support. About a half dozen people, whether it's Charlie Sands or marine biologists, are cited in opposition to the park or expressing concerns about the park, while only 2 people are cited expressing support. So it really doesn't give a fair shake to this project. And Interestingly as well, on page 5, the Jackson Hole News and Guide chose to publish a half-page editorial or half-page opinion piece letter. Don't waste time, cash on kayak play. Okay, they characterize this park like it would only serve kayakers and surfers, not the rest of the community. And the only support we really see here is a short little letter in the viewpoint section coming from a man named Jameson Johnson from San Luis Obispo, California. So Jameson, thanks for writing the paper there. Of course, an opinion, like a letter to the editor that's sent from somebody in California, is really not going to influence people as much as a local letter, right? Malwan Rajneesh putting in a great comment there. Mother Nature must not be touched. If it is the intent for nothing, it is only for something, right? That's a valid concern. You know, that's an issue with this thing. It's like, you know, I see, okay, this could be a great asset to the community, could provide a great opportunity for kids to learn to kayak and surf in a much safer environment than the Class 4 rapids in the Snake River Canyon or the Class 4 rapids up on the Gros Ventre River, much closer to town. But at the same time, it could be an environmental catastrophe if it's not carried out right. And, you know, I generally tend to agree with the perspective, let's not over-commercialize Jackson Hole, let's not overbuild Jackson Hole, let's not overdevelop, let's not bring more tourism here. But looking at this issue, I think that this park wouldn't really bring more tourists, certainly not compared to the existing ski resorts, all the businesses actively advertising to promote the community, you know, trying to bring in customers. You know, there's a couple hundred businesses in Jackson Hole, at least, actively advertising, trying to bring more people here. So accusing a nonprofit public park of potentially bringing a lot more tourist traffic to Jackson, I don't think that's warranted personally. But the environmental issues are a big concern for me, which is why I really, really, really looked into this and wrote a heck of an article about that that I'm going to read to you. It's also posted online at the Sheepeater, www.tukadika.com. The article titled, Clearing Muddied Waters, Clouding the Jackson Hole River Parks Project. We're going to get into it right now. I'm going to read this. If you got any comments, questions, put them in there. Lindsay Sartain, you're coming to Jackson. Let me know when. We'll show you around. So this is that article. I'm going to read it out loud. On Wednesday, August 9th, the Jackson Hole News and Guide slammed the Jackson Hole River Parks project in a misleading front-page opinion piece disguised as objective journalism. Local print media could better serve our community by striving for unbiased journalistic integrity on the front page especially, and restraining editorial content to their viewpoints section. The proposed river park will be considered by Teton County Commissioners on Tuesday, August 15th, so the public record must be set straight. Tuesday's meeting is an ideal venue for wildlife managers, water resource specialists, advocacy groups, and the river running community to express any opposition to or concerns about the proposed park. A biased and inaccurate front-page editorial masquerading as news only serves to shut down legitimate dialogue before it starts. Tuesday's meeting, scheduled for 9 a.m. at the Teton County Administration Building, will not grant full approval for the park, but may get the ball rolling on Teton County's rigorous conditional use permit process. If an agreement is reached with county commissioners, Jackson Hole River Parks project supporters will be in a position to begin negotiations with BLM, WYDOT, Wyoming Game and Fish, U.S. Forest Service, Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, and any other concerned organizations. I'm sure there'll be quite a few. You know, we've got more nonprofits, more NGOs in Jackson Hole than you can shake a stick at. The News and Guide's front page skewering Snake Play Park faces hurdles is accurate that river park planners have a lot of hurdles to hop, but the article contains several blatantly misleading statements. Most obviously, the News and Guide misinformed its readers about the location of the proposed river park. According to the News and Guide article, the park will be located just downstream of the South Park Bridge. This is geographically impossible due to a pair of boat ramps already occupying that space. If Jackson Hole News and Guide seeks to foment public opposition to the park, claiming it would be built atop the existing ramps is certain to upset many boaters. In reality, the proposed park would be located upstream of the bridge, where an unsightly artificial dike comprised of old concrete and rebar currently exists. A rapid called Kitchens presents a navigational hazard to boaters at that point in the river. If you do live in the area and you do drive through South Park, take a good look at that site the next time you're crossing the bridge. Currently, it's the staging area for the big construction project where they're widening the bridge, building bike paths, widening the highway. You know, these are huge projects too. And at the end of this big highway construction project, that site that they're currently using to stage all their vehicles and store all their materials is going to be trashed. And the Jackson River Parks project could help clean that up. As is visible from a glance at the preliminary plans, Jackson Hole River Parks project planners hope to remove the current boating hazard and install a man-made wave constructed out of boulders between a deepened boat channel and the island to the north. Fish habitat boulders are proposed for the shallower river channel along the north side of the island. A landscape park would replace the existing industrial wasteland, and additional parking would augment the busy boat ramp just downstream of the bridge. A network of paths would connect the new park to the recently constructed public boat ramp. A public beach and swimming hole would round out the Jackson Hole River Parks facility. So it sounds pretty cool to me. In addition to the whitewater feature, it's going to be a park, about a 30-acre park. In addition to creating a safer venue for local kids learning to kayak and surf than the Class 4 rapids 20 miles further from town, the Jackson Hole River Park would provide locals from South Park, Hog Island, and Hoback Junction with a public space of their own, similar to Wilson's recently constructed Riverside R Park, the Rendezvous Park. That's a great park, too. You know, it really helps people that want to walk their dogs on the dike, things like that. We could have a very similar park down there in South Park, connected by bike paths to town. Could be a really sweet setup. Contrary to the Jackson Hole News and Guide's inaccurate labeling of the Jackson Hole River Park as the Snake River Kayak Park, the Jackson Hole River Park is a public park designed to accommodate all users: picnickers, dike-walking dog owners, swimmers, boat ramp users in need of parking, etc. It also includes a man-made whitewater feature. In addition to kayakers, that feature would benefit surfers, suppers, and boaters of all stripes who'd like to get a little wet. The proposed rapid would be designed to be easily avoided as well. All of this is clearly ascertained by briefly perusing the proposed planning documents. So if you want to see those documents, check them out. I got them on my website, The Sheep Eater. If you find that article, Clearing Muddy Waters, Clouding the Jackson Hole River Parks Project, you can see all the preliminary planning documents. Looks like a pretty sweet facility to me. After dropping the ball on the most basic fact, the park's location, the News and Guide article devotes 20 paragraphs to a half-dozen voices opposing the park and a mere 3 paragraphs to 2 parties speaking in support of it. Let's take a good look at that opposition now. Skewing science to skewer the JHRPP. The Jackson Hole News and Guide article attributes a shocking statistic to Wyoming Game and Fish aquatic habitat biologist Anna Senecal. Jackson Hole News and Guide reports, the closest comparison she, Anna Senecal, the biologist, could find in terms of design and nature of the river is the channel-spanning whitewater park located in Gore Canyon of the Colorado River. That is almost a complete barrier to fish movement, blocking 90+% of passage for sucker species. To a casual reader, this statistic seems to leave the Jackson Hole River Parks project dead in the water. How accurate is this design and nature of the river comparison of the proposed whitewater park here and the existing park at Gore Canyon in Colorado? Well, not very. The Gore Canyon Whitewater Park in Colorado spans the entire channel of the river. The proposed whitewater feature at South Park would span approximately half of one channel. Except at extremely low flows, there are 2 channels comprising the Snake River at the proposed location just upstream of the South Park Bridge. The Colorado River at Gore Canyon and the Snake River at South Park are also very different in terms of flow. According to USGS historical records, the most recent 20-year average daily mean flow of the Colorado River at Gore Canyon is 1,075 cubic feet per second. The most recent 20-year average daily mean flow of the Snake at Moose is 2,846 cubic feet per second, and at the gauging station above Alpine, it is 4,462 cubic feet per second. There is no gauging station at South Park, but with the added flow from the Gros Ventre River, Fish Creek, and other waterways that join the Snake below Moose, that the daily mean flow at South Park is at least 3 times higher than the daily mean flow of the Colorado River at Gore Canyon. So the river here, much bigger than the river they're dealing with at this site in Colorado. Of course, actual river flows fluctuate greatly throughout the year and from one year to the next. The Colorado River at Gore Canyon rarely peaks above 5,000 CFS, while the Snake River often peaks above or around 20,000 CFS, a 4 times greater rate of flow. This further discredits the notion that the closest comparison in terms of nature of the river is Gore Canyon of the Colorado River, right? It's a drastically different river, and it's a drastically different facility. Also questionable is the Jacksonville News and Guide statement that Gore Canyon's Whitewater Park is almost a complete barrier to fish movement, blocking 90+% of passage for sucker species. What Colorado Parks and Wildlife researchers actually said is that at relatively low water, 860 CFS, the passable width at which bluehead suckers could venture upstream was reduced by 92% by pre-construction conditions. This means that at a relatively low flow of 860 CFS, adult bluehead suckers should still be able to make their way upstream through the Gore Canyon whitewater feature, but their options are limited to 8% of the previous river width. For juvenile bluehead suckers traveling at 860 CFS, that figure increases to 30% of the pre-construction river width. This is certainly a dramatic reduction in passable width for the bluehead sucker, but it doesn't validate Jacksonville News and Guide's broader blanket statement that Gore Canyon is almost a complete barrier to fish movement. Right? That's a big jump to say a complete barrier to fish movement. Is that all fish? Is that just some fish? At all levels of flow? Like, what are we talking about here? You know, there's more to the story than that. Making a big blanket statement like that is rather biased. Jason Carey from riverrestoration.org explained the situation to me as such. Now, bear in mind, Jason Carey, riverrestoration.org, these guys build whitewater parks. These guys build parks. So his statements might be biased, but when I reached out to everybody who had been quoted in this article, you know, I sent an email to the writers of this. I sent an email to everybody who was quoted in there. He's one of the only people that got back to me. Actually, that's not true. Other people got back to me, but he's the only one that really took the time to explain something to me. Other people sent me links to scientific inquiries and studies and things like that. So I read all of that, but he did a good job explaining it to me. So here we go. Quote from Jason Carey, riverrestoration.org. The structure at Gore Canyon reduced the channel width available to fish passage from the full channel from the full width of channel to approximately 10% of the width of that location. However, that 10% of width is equivalent to 17 feet of channel at extreme low flows. 17 feet of passable width is similar to the width of the passable natural channel 600 feet upstream of the structure at low flows. At high flows above 4,000 CFS, the entire 100% or 180 feet of channel at the structure is open to fish passage, equivalent to existing conditions 600 feet upstream. Passable width reduction is not an indicator of actually creating a barrier to fish migration. The only statement closely related to almost a complete barrier to fish movement has been that the structure may be a total barrier to some fish at some flows, and further analysis is needed. So that's coming from Colorado Department of Parks and Wildlife. This statement is based on flow conditions when it is unknown if fish are migrating upstream, and again, the natural channel provides a similar barrier at these flow conditions upstream and downstream of the structure. The Gore Canyon structure was designed, permitted, and constructed with the acknowledged impact of an additional fish migration obstacle similar to those fish migration obstacles upstream of the structure. The Gore Canyon structure had a requirement to capture and control the entire flow of the Colorado River as dictated by the state of Colorado. This increased the challenge for fish passage. This is not a requirement of the structure proposed on the Snake River, and therefore the structures and sites are not directly comparable. Okay? So that's a quote from Jason at riverrestoration.org, right? We didn't see that in the paper. So, if lower flows in a full span feature at Gore Canyon pose a potential problem for upstream fish migration, 3 times higher average flows on the Snake combined with the half span feature proposed here sounds like a double whammy solution. More research is certainly warranted, but it seems that neither the rivers nor the wave designs are notably similar. Thus, we see a local example of how science can be skewed to make a point. As William Shakespeare so eloquently put it, the devil can cite scripture for his own purposes. To be fair, perhaps Wyoming game and fish biologists chose to compare the JHRPP with Gore Canyon because research on the environmental impact of whitewater parks is in short supply. The impact of whitewater parks on fisheries and river ecology does need to be studied in more depth. It seems that the general migratory habits of western fish also need to be studied in more depth. There are currently dozens of whitewater parks dotting the U.S. and dozens more in the works. Some of these parks probably do not meet the needs of migrating fish and stand in sharp contrast to what a natural river looks like. Some of these parks look more like dams with steep spillways than natural rapids. The recently constructed Boise Whitewater Park comes to mind, right? If you haven't seen that one, take a look. The Boise Whitewater Park, it's an urban thing. I think they were replacing an existing dam, so the river was already ecologically compromised, I believe. I know that was the case in Bend, Oregon, when they built their river park. But, it's important. This research needs to be done. Of course, no one is proposing a dam-like structure at South Park. We've got too many dams in Teton County already, most notably the gigantic Jackson Lake Reservoir Dam in Grand Teton National Park. If local environmental activists really wish to shut down the overdevelopment of Jackson Hole and increase the migratory range of the bluehead sucker, that ecosystem-splitting eyesore has got to go. A lot of people don't realize it, but Jackson Lake up in Grand Teton National Park is actually a reservoir. Okay, I think there's something like 84,000 dams in the United States. 84,000. And we have several hundred right here in Wyoming. Seriously, the Jackson Lake Dam might need to go. But would being underwater hurt property values on the West Bank too much for Wilson NIMBYs to bear? Probably so. All jokes aside, even if the Jackson Hole River Parks project is never built, perhaps open dialogue and further inquiries into the environmental impact of Jackson's proposed whitewater park could help aid the ecologically responsible design of parks elsewhere. If it is built, perhaps the JHRPP could serve as an example of what an ecologically sound whitewater park can look like. Either way, we're better off opening real dialogue and sticking to the facts than skewing science to manipulate public opinion. Okay, so there we go. That covers the science. There are a few other scientific comments in there, but that was the big one, that it would be a block to migratory fish. Another statement in there is that it would affect the hatch of certain species of flies that fly fishermen depend on, for the trout population. So that issue, I didn't really find much science supporting that notion either, that a half channel spanning man-made whitewater feature would impact the hatch of flies along a significant portion of the river. It seems like a stretch to me. Moving on, curious comments from Charlie Sands. In the interest of further exposing opinion disguised as front-page news, it is important to note that news and guide coverage of the Jackson Hole River Parks project leads off with sarcastic remarks from Charlie Sands, a man who has made millions of dollars over the course of a 56-year career spent commercially utilizing the Snake River. It's like putting a climbing wall or an elevator on the Grand Teton, said Charlie Sands, longtime owner of Sands Whitewater. I told the county, if you're going to allow that, I want a Ferris wheel up there. Sands called the river park ridiculous, and he worried it would be a burden for scenic floaters and fishing boats to pass through. The county, he said, ought not to allow private businesses to screw around with a public good like the snake. If Sands comments in the Jackson Hole News and Guide about private businesses screwing around with the snake are to be taken seriously, perhaps you should take a look in the mirror before criticizing a local nonprofit trying to build a public park. Does he ever wonder what the local environmental and Disneyfication impacts of his 56 years of commercial river use have been? Do you? For decades prior and currently at unprecedented levels, commercial rafting and fishing trips run all day, every day, all summer long, from far north in Grand Teton National Park to far south in the Snake River Canyon. How does heavy commercial use along almost the entire length of the waterway affect fish, terrestrial wildlife, and overall ecosystem integrity? How does the impact of one man-made wave spanning half of the river in an already developed location compare to the combined impacts from a daily flotilla of tourists and anglers forking out big bucks to ride the local equivalent to Disney World's Splash Mountain? One stark example comes to mind. Back in 2003, a Sands Whitewater camp cook started the East Table Creek Fire, which burned 3,600 acres, took 50 firefighters and 7 helicopters to contain, cost $3.2 million to fight, shut down the highway and river in the canyon for a week during the peak of the summer tourist season, and permanently changed the character of the wild and scenic Snake River Canyon. In 2003, Sands was billed $3.2 million to cover the cost of the blaze, but only paid $1 million in damages when the legal dust finally settled. This prompts the obvious question, who's going to foot the bill for Charlie's Ferris wheel atop the Grand Teton? Charlie Sands' opposition to the Jackson Hole River Parks project is like the ringmaster of a circus ridiculing the notion of adding another ride to the carnival he helped start. But my intention is not to butt heads or excessively criticize Mr. Sands. Mr. Sands is one of the first 2 people to drop into S&S Couloir, the Sands and Sims Couloir, so respect for his skiing is certainly due. And as a transplant from the East Coast, he made a respectable name and impressive fortune for himself in the exclusive community out here. That's commendable as well. So I'm not really trying to pick on Charlie Sands, pointing out some facts, some historical facts here, but I don't want to get into a pissing match with Charlie Sands, that's for sure. The guy's a badass. Truth told, the blame for bias does not lie on Sands' shoulders, but on the media that chose to use his words to further their own front-page agenda. Did Mr. Sands call the paper to make a statement, or did reporters from the paper call him in search of a quote? Yesterday I called an email, that was 2 days ago, still haven't heard back. Yesterday I called and emailed Mike Cosmerl and Allie Gross, the writers of Wednesday's Jackson Hole News and Guide article about the Jackson Hole River Parks project, but neither has gotten back to me. My guess would be that they contacted him. Quoting a longtime raft company operator about the JHRPP is like asking a crusty dude rancher if he supports building mountain bike trails in the public forests where his wealthy guests ride. It's like asking an old-school Teton mountaineer if an artificial boulder park should be built at the base of Snow King. It's like asking President Trump how Teton County should best meet the needs of our much-needed immigrant workers. It's a dirty trick often played by the media to hide a biased outlet's stance behind an independent citizen's opinion. Okay, we see that in the paper all the time. It's funny, I saw an ad yesterday for this laundry detergent called Drops. And this guy's sitting in a bathtub naked. It looked like a pretty cool product, but he's sitting there and, you know, the thing's a joke, but somebody takes a phone and puts it up to his ear and he's like, yes, I'm glad you love the Drops. It's a fabulous product. Thank you for the call. You know, it's like it's totally fake, but that's the point, is like, if you get another person to say what you want to say for you, it makes it look like more people support that perspective and you don't have to say anything, right? Me personally, I like to speak my mind. I don't hide behind quotes. Not surprising, in light of the editorial on the cover, this week's JH News and Guide also published a half-page opinion piece on page 5 entitled, "Don't Waste Time, Cash on Kayak Play." This guest shot by Sue Laurie accuses Jackson Hole River Park's project of requesting county funds be used to design, build, and maintain the proposed river park. Conversations with Aaron Pruzan of the Jackson Hole Kayak Club and the JHRPP lead me to believe these statements are false. But we'll all find out more at the public meeting on Tuesday. That's 9 a.m. at the Teton County Commissioners, Teton County Administrative Building. If you can't attend, or you want to make your voice heard for or against the river park, or frankly any project or concern, maybe you want to talk about the Forest Stearns horse abuse video, whatever it is, you can contact all the county commissioners directly by sending an email to this address, commissioners@tetonwyo.org. Okay, I'll show you that again a little later. What we do know is that the Jackson Hole River Parks project is a nonprofit organization hoping to build a free public park supported by private donors. The proposed park would be located in an area that was already heavily developed decades ago, and building it would help clean up the mess created by the dike builders of a previous generation and the highway/bridge construction crew currently occupying the land. The Jackson Hole River Parks project has been in the works since 2012 and is still years from full approval. But it seems like someone at the JH News and Guide wants to nip it in the bud. If the Jackson Hole News and Guide seeks to inform its readers with reputable reportage, they could learn a lesson or two from Buck Rail's coverage of the JHRPP that also came out on Wednesday, August 9th. Buck Rail's coverage effectively answers the questions who, what, where, and when in its opening sentence without any apparent bias. I'm going to read you that article from Buck Rail. You know, all the Jackson Hole News and Guide had to do to really inform their readers is put a short announcement that, hey, the county is seeking input on this. Make your voice heard. Instead, we got a front page article, a front page editorial disguised as news that basically just slams this project on every front they could find. You know, the Blue Nose Suckers, the rafting community, false statements about the location of the proposed park. These are all very serious problems. These are all very serious obfuscations of the truth. But Buck Rail's coverage much better. Want to comment on the proposed Whitewater Park? ? I don't know. Do you? If you do, that's where you go. Buck Rail posted on August 9th, 2017, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. The Teton Board of County Commissioners will be reviewing and discussing a proposed whitewater park on the Snake River near the South Park boat ramp on Tuesday, August 15th, as part of their regularly scheduled County Commission meeting starting at 9 a.m. Members of the public will have the opportunity to provide comment on the proposal. Currently, the Jackson Hole River Parks project is requesting that the Board of Commissioners direct county staff to initiate the planning review process, which could involve beginning a conditional use permit process. Commissioners will not be considering approval of the overall project. Rather, they will be discussing how it should proceed through the county's planning and community review process. Okay, this thing's far from approved. Representatives from the Jackson Hole River Parks project, as well as consultants from riverrestoration.org and Parks and Recreation staff, provided an informational presentation to commissioners in late June. The potential project is in the beginning stages, and the Board of Commissioners hopes to solicit input from a diverse set of stakeholders and interested citizens to help guide the outcome. Okay, so that's Buck Rail's coverage. Pretty concise, pretty clear, pretty informative. They let people know where the meeting is. They let people know what they're going to talk about. They let people know how far along the project is, and they kept personal biases and blatantly false statements out of it, right? Full disclosure from your writer, that's me. This is that article. Anyone still reading is probably well aware that this article and video exposing bias in the local print media is biased itself. That's the difference between a private website and a public paper, right? We're all allowed to express our opinions. We're all allowed to hold our biases and debate things. But if you got the keys to the newspaper and you're writing front page articles that are blatantly biased, that's a problem, right? People are pooping all over this project, and what gives them the right? You know, if you got a personal opinion, put it in the editorial section, put it in a letter to the editor, post it on your own personal website, but don't masquerade it as news. Plus, of course it is. All media is at least a little biased, from the topics reported on to the stances taken by writers and editors. Ethnocentrism injects bias. Accepted societal norms and assumptions inject bias. Commercial interests and advertising relationships inject bias. Special interest groups, governments, and non-governmental organizations inject bias. Personal opinions inject bias. That said, mainstream news' job, especially at the local level and certainly on the front page, is to get the story as straight as possible. A misleading article in our local paper ridiculing a local nonprofit attempting to build a park deserves to get called out, right? My own bias on this topic is a product of my experiences surfing, kayaking, rafting, and reading about the Snake River. I've read the recent headlines about 3 deaths in the river this year. Okay, one guy died from a heart attack on the scenic stretch near South Park. Obviously he didn't drown, but we had 2 other people drown. One guy on the 4th of July at Kingswave. I think it sounds like he was intoxicated, not wearing a life jacket, but, get confirmation on that. Another guy, I think they called the official cause of death hypothermia, where he fell out in the rapids lower downstream. So 3 deaths on the river this year. A few years ago, I watched a girlfriend wearing a good life jacket get sucked down for 20 seconds in the hydraulic just downstream of Haircut Rock. I've seen similar things happen several times to strong surfers at the lunch counter. I swam a friend ashore who went into shock after almost drowning while trying to learn to surf at the lunch counter, and I've witnessed another surfer saving an unresponsive child who fell out of a raft that flipped in the Big Kahuna Rapid just upstream. That happened just a few weeks ago. Big kudos to Tim for saving this kid's life, right? This raft flip, all the people floated down, and some of the adults, like 3 kids, maybe 4 kids, and 1 more adult, were going down the lunch counter rapid with nothing, whether it was like a pump floating by them and some paddles. The other adults had gotten the raft to shore upstream and clearly struggled to get it righted because they only showed up maybe 10 minutes later. They came floating through looking very worried, very concerned. Tim, the man that he is, helped bring a kid to shore who was unresponsive, and the other people swam to shore. But pretty cool, The point being that the canyon is a little dangerous. It's class 4. Most of the time you go down there, no big problem, but it's a class 4 river. I, myself, have gotten sucked down several times and came up scared and sputtering, wondering, what if the river didn't let go when it did? I've talked with a living legend, local pro snowboarder who has always wanted to learn to surf the lunch counter, but is still scared of it in the wake of the tragic 2001 incident when a local teen was pushed in and never resurfaced. His body was found 2 years later in the Palisades Reservoir. Despite the dangers, and like many of you reading this, I've grown to love playing in the river and think that local kids should have a safer place closer to town to practice their whitewater skills before braving the more unpredictable and dangerous Class 4 rapids in the canyon or up on the Gros Ventre or down here at the Grays River, right? In my opinion, the public whitewater park won't increase tourism to Jackson Hole. It won't be advertised like the hundreds of local businesses and pair of national parks catering to tourists. The proposed wave itself could only accommodate a handful of users simultaneously, and the park, the 36 acre park, could be a great asset to underserved locals in South Park, Hog Island, and Hoback Junction. Postscript. Mainstream media bias is why the Wall Street Journal never asks how the privately owned Federal Reserve Bank gained the right to create fiat currency out of thin air and charge interest on all dollars in existence. Bias is why the New York Times never asked the question, what really happened on 9/11? Bias is why we never see an editorial in a mainstream paper that ponders whether or not America's endless war on terror is in fact an act of global terrorism. Bias is why mainstream environmentalists rarely ask how all those unnatural cirrus clouds up in the sky might be contributing to climate change. We're all biased in our way, but some biases are much more dangerous and destructive than others. I'm biased myself and couldn't help but throw all that in there. One love, peace. So there we go. Melanie Askew, what up? Hello from Wyoming. Thanks for tuning in. We got 26 viewers. Once again, this is not my normal show. We're going to get back into that tomorrow. We're going to take a good look at probably the local weekend edition paper, maybe USA Today's weekend edition if I can get my hands on it, and get back on the grind of looking at the macro issues. Briefly, like we said earlier, disturbingly, healthcare costs rising 48% in Wyoming for people under the Affordable Care Act. Great coverage, Jackson Hole News and God. I don't rag on everything you do, just the stuff that's a little shady. And what else? Bitcoin. Holy Bitcoin. It was $2,000 a couple of weeks ago. Now it's 3,800. It's almost doubled in value. All these cryptocurrencies are shooting up like crazy. Who knows what's going to happen there? If you are involved in cryptocurrencies, if you want to invest in cryptocurrencies, keep a close eye on them and make sure you know an effective way to get out if those markets tank. Who knows what's going to happen there? Who knows if that's like the solution to the problem or just the next stage of the problem? But one thing's for sure, if you play your cards right in that highly speculative realm, you could potentially make a lot of money for very, very, very little effort. Speculation. But back to the River Parks project topic, full disclosure, I'm in favor of it. And this is why. One, I think it's a great place to teach local kids to surf and kayak in a much safer environment than the rapids further from town. Okay, it's a lot closer to town, and it would be a lot safer facility for kids to learn the basics like rolling a kayak or standing up on a surfboard or paddling a sup, etc. Two, I think it'd be good because it will rehab the concrete and rebar shoreline currently getting even uglier by way of the ongoing highway and bridge widening construction project. Okay, that place is getting trashed right now. If you haven't checked out that stretch of river, they won't let you in there right now because they got all this construction equipment. But if you look, you'll notice that this is not a natural shoreline, right? It's directly upstream from a bridge. The shoreline is a dike, an artificial dike made out of old sidewalk debris and stuff. Not an attractive place. The Snake River is covered with, or is surrounded by dikes on both sides for a lot of its length in Jackson Hole. A lot of those multi-million dollar houses in Wilson would be underwater. They're in the floodplain of the natural Snake River, So it's not exactly wild and scenic up there in Jackson. This park, the Jackson Hole River Parks project, would provide a public park for all users like Wilson's R Park. And in my opinion, I think it would serve the underserved population on the south side of Teton County, the folks that live up Game Creek, South Park, Rafter J, Hog Island, Hoback Junction, and all, Munger Mountain, all the people. There are thousands of people living down there. Just downstream of that proposed park location, there are over 100 trailer homes, and I'm sure those people that have very small yards, these longtime local resident workers that live there, would sure enjoy to have a park near their homes, a lot closer than, say, having to drive to town. What's the closest public park to Hog Island? I think there's probably a few small parks in Rafter J that I can recall, but that's about it. And it'd be cool if the kids that live down there had a place to go play. What else? I think it'd be cool too. I think the rafting community could benefit from this because it gives scenic floaters the option to hit one little rapid. It's not going to be a big wave. It's going to be a very small wave. It's not going to be flipping boats. But it gives the scenic rafters the option to end the trip with one rapid, which sounds like fun. Sounds like it would put money into Charlie Sand's pocket and the pockets of all the river guides. Provide hours of healthy entertainment for locals of all ages, no doubt about that. I don't really plan on surfing the thing myself, but I think it would be a lot of fun for a lot of people. And in my opinion, it would not significantly increase the summer tourism crowds. I can't stress that enough. I think, in my opinion, it would be kind of on par with the new Boulder Park at the base of Snow King in terms of the total draw of more tourist traffic to Jackson Hole. Unlike a lot of the country, Jackson doesn't have a shortage of money. Jackson certainly doesn't have a shortage of business, at least in the current financial climate where the stock market's at all-time record highs due to quantitative easing. But here in Jackson, a lot of people are wary about projects that could potentially bring more traffic to town, especially with the eclipse coming up here. People are estimating 500,000 people in the surrounding area for this eclipse. It's going to be totally bonkers. That's why I'll be laying low down here in Alpine. But it's probably going to be bonkers here too. But the point is, this river park probably will not be a big draw for tourism. Certainly nowhere near the draw of, for example, tripling slopeside accommodations at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort over the last 10, 15 years, or all the big projects going on at the base of Snow King, the new Snow King Mountain Coaster, the new Snow King Ropes Course. These are businesses. These are entities that are profit-driven, and they advertise, whereas a public park that happens to have a whitewater play feature is not going to be actively pursuing customers, So, like I said, it's not going to be a big wave. It's not going to be the kind of thing. I probably will try it out a few times, but I doubt that I would even enjoy surfing it. Sounds like it's more something designed for the kids that want to learn to kayak and surf. And last thing, the environmental concerns. We looked at that in depth. They were brought up here. Looking at the science, looking at the studies, it doesn't seem like the Jackson Hole River Parks project would be a complete barrier to fish movement, not by a long shot. Sounds like it will cover about half of one of two channels in the river at that space. Due to the high flows of the Snake River relative to other rivers with whitewater parks on them, this whitewater park doesn't need to span the entire river. No one has ever proposed that it span the entire river. And I think it's important to note here, the Jackson Hole News and Guide, they only devoted a couple paragraphs, to letting people in who support the project have their voices heard. And there's a really good quote from Aaron Pruzan here. Pruzan, owner of Rendezvous River Sports, head of the Jackson Hole Kayak Club. He's been pushing hard for this thing for 5 years now. And there's a really good quote here in the Jackson Hole News and Guide, so I'm going to close out with that. Cruzan was hopeful the county would press forward with the Whitewater Park and go through the rigorous conditional use process that would allow the preliminary concept to be tweaked to address concerns about fish passage. If we can't satisfy those concerns after you come out of this application, it's like, okay, this isn't the right thing to do here, Cruzan said. Everyone involved in this project loves and cares about the Snake River enough that if that was the case, we'd walk away. So there we see the principal organizer, the principal coordinator of the Jackson Hole River Parks project, clearly stating that if this thing is going to affect the river in some major way, affect fisheries, bluehead sucker migration, or the overall ecological integrity of the Snake River, they don't want to do it. And again, this project is not anywhere near approved. There are no finalized plans. You can go to my website, thesheepeater.tukadika.com, to look at some preliminary plans put out by riverrestoration.org. But this stuff is not finalized. The dialogue on this issue is just getting started. And I think that even if this park is never built, having a good community discourse on it will help. Because Jackson is such a leading light in mountain communities, it will help raise the bar for whitewater parks elsewhere to make sure they do take into account all of the environmental factors associated with that. Right now, as I said earlier, there are dozens of whitewater parks all over the country. There are dozens more being planned, being proposed. A lot of, the river surfing thing is taking off. It is. Kayaking is huge. River sports in general are huge. And these things aren't going to go away. Even if in Jackson they shut this thing down right away, we're going to see more of these all over the country regardless. And I think Jackson could really take the lead here and showcase, A, how to talk about the thing properly, right? Proper dialogue. And B, if it is built, what a proper river park looks like. So Jackson Hole River Parks project, full disclosure, I'm in favor of it. Reluctantly at times when I think about the environmental impact, but you got to make a decision once in a while, right? Again, if you want to make your voice heard, email commissioners@tetonwyo.org, commissioners@tetonwyo.org. Otherwise, Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., you're welcome to attend that meeting at the county administration. Word has it, a group of supporters of the Jackson Hole River Parks project will be meeting at approximately 8:30 a.m. at Rendezvous River Sports for coffee and donuts and bananas and apples and oranges and all that to get fueled up before going over there to have a good showing in front of the commissioners. It'll be interesting to see who's there. Be interesting to talk to the writers from the Jackson Hole News and Guide, Mike Kosmerl and Allie Gross, about their perspectives, their own personal opinions on this topic. Because it sure seems like from their coverage in the paper, front page story, that they're rather opposed to it. This isn't an oil and gas development, guys. This is not a serious environmental concern here. And it's a small nonprofit in the preliminary stages of negotiations with government. So we'll see what happens. Thank you all for tuning in again. Sunday, tomorrow, we'll be back with our normal show. We'll be looking at the weekend edition of the Jackson Hole Daily. Maybe USA Today, taking the local news, taking the mainstream news, and injecting a healthy dose of critical analysis and truth into it. So, thank you so much. We got a few comments. Shannon Wendricks, how about those cray-cray white folks down south right now? Sorry, just tuning in. Maybe you already covered it. Shannon, I didn't cover it yet, but I did see some videos about that on Wake Up. I believe yesterday we posted a live stream from there, so check that out. But, a lot of ignorant people in this country. And it's up to people like us to raise the bar, public dialogue, raise the bar, public consciousness, and make people aware. So thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for your likes. Thanks for your shares. Thanks for your comments. Again, we'll be back to the normal show tomorrow. Look forward to chatting with all of you then. This is your boy Max Mogren signing out from beautiful Alpine, Wyoming for Wake Up News, Wake Up Wyoming. Stay active, stay aware, stay positive, but don't sugarcoat it. One love. Peace.